Hey everyone, it's Kong with just a quick little Freekong update now that the monthly event is underway and we've managed to grind enough points to get the new free faction buffer bag. That's right, this is always a pleasant time for the Freekong account. Love getting a new free unit. There's a little bit of a change with the faction buffer bag that comes from this event. They've added 4 new heroes, which are the faction buffers from Langrisser Reincarnation Tensei. So they've added Licorice, Ares, Hilda, and Christiane. I've added them to my usual little chart that breaks down kind of the value that heroes could potentially bring to the Freekong account, and I'll go over them right now. So the other thing to keep in mind is I also still have a login day bag. I forget which this was, but this is the bag that has all of the Langrisser Mobile OCs from the first couple chapters. So we'll take a look at those in a second. The only reason I mention that now is because if I'm considering comboing 2 characters, some of these characters might rely on each other, like a character from the other bag for bonds. Those are the characters that you'll see highlighted in this bright cyan color here in the chart. So we'll get to those as we talk about them, but let's take a look at the event bag first. As in the past couple bags, the true top contenders are Jugler and Sigma still, because these are the heroes from this bag that have full access to their bonds. They also unlock a couple other characters' bonds. Jugler unlocks Pierre and Sophia. Sophia actually gets a lot of use on this account. Sigma unlocks Alfred, who doesn't really get a lot of use. Jugler has no SP class. He does have a faction buff for Origins of Light, but I do already have that from D-Heart. Sigma comes with his SP class. He has a new faction buff for this account, Yeles Legends, because I don't have Landius or Enya, obviously. So that would bring a new buff for Alfred, Elise, and Mew, who currently don't get a faction buff from anyone on the Freekong account. The only other thing worth noting here is that there is a Ragnarok of the Realms map that is cheesable by Sigma. I don't think I've done that one yet. Jugler, on the other hand, is just kind of generally useful, but I will say, in all my years of playing on Freekong, I've never run into a map where I thought to myself, oh, I wish I had Jugler to help me with this. Especially now that I have a lot of reactive healing from SP Tiaras. I guess if I was gonna use Jugler for anything, it would be if I was forced into running a pure rush box in Bronze Tier Apex Arena. Jugler could run in and do his 3C and do splashy Jugler stuff. A couple of the other characters before I get too far down in the list that have maybe some potential to be picked here. Elwyn. Now he won't have his attack bond because that needs me to have Liana. That said, he does unlock some bonds for Ledin, Captain Mac, and Hein. He also has access to his own SP class, and he would unlock Hein's SP class. And he brings a faction buff, an auto buff for Legion of Glory, and a kind of interesting buff for Empire now that he has his casting skill. Now the only reason I really mention characters like Elwyn and Leon here is that we do seem to be relatively reassured that we're going to be getting a bag like this, you know, every once in a while. Every 6 months, maybe every 12 months, they find another excuse to pop out a faction buffer bag. So if these are going to be coming back relatively frequently, you see Leon here, he's kind of a bit further down the list, even though he's a useful character, but he doesn't have access to his attack bond unless I get Elwyn. So if we do think we're going to be getting another one of these bags in the future, grabbing Elwyn or Leon now, and then getting the other one in the future, would at least allow me to have a fully unlocked and fully powered up Leon. But that does kind of rely on a little bit of gambling and relying on a future bag. Okay, so the last choice I have here in the kind of semi-viable category is Landius. He wouldn't have his attack bond, which really sucks for Landius because he's an attack-converting tank, but he is getting his SP class this week. He also brings that Yeles faction buff that Sigma would bring. He's further down here than Sigma because Sigma's completely unlockable, he's able to be fully powered up. Landius isn't. Other than that, they kind of bring the same thing to the table. Now, obviously the big difference is that Landius is a useful, high-range PvE tank, who can be used in PvP as well, whereas Sigma isn't. But for PvE, at least, on the Freekong account, Grenier is super strong. Freekong's Grenier is nuts. He covers the PvE range tanking really well. Landius would probably be a bit stronger in Bronze tier Apex than Grenier, so that is a consideration, but I don't think that moves him up to be equal with Jugler and Sigma. But maybe that's something you guys want to debate amongst yourselves in the comments or on Concord. So the 4 new characters in this bag aren't really in contention for me to pick them, but I will go over them really quick since they're new on the chart, and we'll take a look at what they bring to the table. For Licorice, I would not be able to unlock her defensive bond because I need Ares for that. She would unlock the defensive bond for the free Cortez that we're currently working on from the daily login event. Cortez is kind of nice as just a general debuffer for the Freekong account, but without one of his bonds, he wouldn't have access to his Central Heart bond either, so Licorice is useful for that. She does have a faction buff for Dark Reincarnation. It's not new because I already have Bozal on this account, so that's why it's kind of listed in orange there, along with no new buffs. Next up we have Ares, who does have access to his all-important attack bond, but he wouldn't have his defensive bond because I would need Maya. He doesn't unlock bonds for anyone else that Freekong has access to. He would bring a new faction buff to the table, which is the Langrisser Reincarnation Tensei buff, but as you can see, that actually doesn't buff anyone new, and the reason for that is because there's literally only one hero in this faction on Freekong's account, and that's Ainz. Okay, third up and fourth up, we see Hilda and Christiane way at the bottom of this chart. Partly that's because I don't have access to either of their bonds, which as a tank especially sucks. Hilda unlocks the defensive bond for Julian, who is going to be an upcoming free login character in several months. Christiane unlocks no one, and they both do have faction buffs, Hilda for Rebirth, and Christiane for Princess, who I do have buffed by Luna at the moment. Completely bondless tanks. I've already got a super functional Grenier, along with a really well-built Freya, a really well-built Vargas, a really well-built Aaron, so we're not hurting too much for tanks, and if I was going to pick a tank here, it would much more likely be Landius or even Jugler than Hilda or Christiane. Okay, so let's move on to the second chart, the chart for the login bag that I got from logging in for however many days. I have actually had this bag in my inventory for a while, and I just haven't opened it, partly because I've been neglectful, partly because Freekong's not in a huge rush to buff out the roster, and partly because I wanted to give you guys the chance to vote on one of these characters. I have a pretty good idea of who's actually going to be useful from here, as you can see by who's floated to the top. Below a certain level, I'm not really considering most of these characters, which is why the kind of cyan highlighted dependencies don't really enter into this decision. So the most obvious choices are Zerida, who I do have attack and defense bond unlockers for. She also unlocks the attack bond for Farakia, which brings another free character into play and kind of enables me to... Well, I use Farakia a little bit now, but without her attack bond, she's not quite as cheesy. She also has a brand new faction buff for me. I don't have a buffer for Meteor yet, which would give a new buff to Alfred and Elise. Alright, in a potentially unlikely second place, we have Akka. She's up here because I have access to both of her bond unlockers as well, which is really nice. Now as you can see, there's nothing else really here on the chart that recommends her. She doesn't unlock anyone else's bonds, she doesn't have a faction buff, but here's the thing. She would be the only access that Freekong has to an actual Act Again skill. I don't have Liana, I don't have Sissy White, I don't have Enya, I don't have Florentia, so Akka's Act Again could potentially be a game changer. I think she's a compelling option, and we shouldn't discount her just because Zerida looks so appealing. The third choice here at the top of the list is Illustrial, who, like Akka, doesn't really have anything else going for her other than the fact that I can fully unlock her bonds. But she doesn't really bring much else to the table like Zerida and Akka do, so I'm not really considering her up there with those other two. Everyone else here I don't really consider to be in the running. Each one kinda does something, but doesn't really do tons for me. So that brings us down to our big choice. From the login bag, is it going to be Zerida or Akka? And from the event bag, is it going to be Jugler, Sigma, or some combination of Elwyn or Leon, or maybe even a Dark Horse Landius? I'm going to go ahead and say I don't really think Landius should be on the table here. I just don't really need him for anything yet. Maybe after a couple more of these bags, he'll float to the top. But I think I'm going to make this one, I'm going to pare this one down to Jugler and Sigma with like a long shot Elwyn or Leon pick. Jugler is really here just to do like tanky reactive healing stuff, some splashy stuff, and the fact that I have his bonds, that makes it a bit easy. But he doesn't really get used for anything specific. Sigma is a long-range assassin who can cheese some content. I don't have access to Werner or anything like that, so Sigma is really kind of going to be one of Freekong's longest-range units. And like I said, between Elwyn and Leon, that's really just banking on getting another one of these bags in the future to be able to fully unlock Leon later. But is Sigma now worth more than maybe a potential future Leon? I'm really interested to hear what your thoughts are, especially where it comes between Zerida and Akka. Zerida is such a fan favorite, and she's a real killing machine with her center casting passive and with that new bell that we got from the Whale Forge. A real threat, but again, for what, bronze tier PvP? You know Freekong runs pretty much anything in PvP, and PvE? I don't know. I think Akka, with her act again and her just wolf shenanigans, might be a really interesting choice. Yeah, Zerida, Akka, Jugler, Sigma, maybe future maybe Leon. Let me know. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Thanks for offering your very valuable opinions. I'll catch you in the next one. Happy Langrissing.